Merci beaucoup, monsieur le directeur, pour cette introduction très aimable. Merci pour l'invitation. Merci à la Fondation Martin Bodmer. J'aimerais mentionner monsieur du cimetière en son absence pour l'invitation de parler aujourd'hui. Vous avez déjà mentionné les deux contextes de cette conférence de ce soir. Le 400e anniversaire de la mort de Shakespeare et puis les recherches que Devani Singh et moi-même avons menées sur Shakespeare à la Fondation Martin Bodmer dans le contexte du Bodmer Lab. C'est donc en deux temps que nous allons faire cette conférence et en deux langues. Premier temps en français, ensuite en anglais. D'abord Devani, ensuite moi-même sur les recherches du Bodmer Lab. Mais je commence par Shakespeare à 400 ans, la question de son statut aujourd'hui, 400 ans après sa mort, et la question du pourquoi de son statut, 400 ans après sa mort. Mais retournons au début. Qui était William Shakespeare? Né en 1564 et mort en 1616, Shakespeare était un poète et dramaturge anglais à l'époque élisabéthaine et jacobienne. Il avait certes du succès, mais il était loin d'être une célébrité. Et lorsqu'il est décédé, personne ne semble avoir éprouvé le besoin de marquer l'événement. Alors qui est Shakespeare aujourd'hui? En 1999, un grand sondage a été mené en Angleterre pour désigner « The Man of the Millennium ». Et la personne qui est sortie en tête était bel et bien Shakespeare. Donc Shakespeare aujourd'hui, 400 ans après sa mort, c'est l'homme du dernier millénaire. J'ajoute quelques autres éléments de réponse. Pour la langue anglaise, Shakespeare est l'auteur qui l'a enrichi plus que personne, avec, on estime aujourd'hui, environ 2000 nouveaux mots. Pour le monde du livre, Shakespeare est un auteur dont les œuvres se vendent par des centaines de milliers d'exemplaires chaque année en anglais et dans une bonne centaine d'autres langues. Pour le monde académique, Shakespeare est l'auteur littéraire le plus traité du monde, sur qui les publications remplissent des bibliothèques entières. De multiples congrès scientifiques sont organisés chaque année et celui de la Shakespeare Association of America, lui tout seul, rassemble régulièrement plus de 1000 chercheurs. Pour le monde du théâtre, Shakespeare est l'auteur à succès par excellence, avec des dizaines de représentations chaque jour dans les 4 coins du monde. Pour Hollywood, Shakespeare est un des scénaristes les plus sollicités. Le dernier Macbeth est sorti d'ailleurs il n'y a pas longtemps, et le nombre de versions cinématographiques de Hamlet dépasse aujourd'hui la 50aine. Pour le monde de la publicité, Shakespeare est une source de slogans et d'allusions intarissables. Le monde du marketing se sert pour promouvoir toutes sortes de produits, que ce soit de la bière, to beer or not to beer, que ce soit des produits de nettoyage, Lady Macbeth, brand floor cleaner, out damn spot, que ce soit des cigares, everything that grows holds imperfection but a little moment, Shakespeare's vintage, que ce soit des pianos Steinway, if music be the fruit of love, play on, que ce soit des barres de chocolat, Romeo, Juliet, ou que ce soit un opérateur de télécommunications, Romeo believes Juliet is dead, Juliet dies because Romeo believes that she is dead. Communication is very important. Tout cela pour dire qu'aujourd'hui, Shakespeare est non seulement l'auteur à la tête du canon littéraire, mais aussi un produit commercial avec un chiffre d'affaires dans les milliards. Shakespeare est-il donc l'homme du dernier millénaire, le plus grand dramaturge de tous les temps, voire même le plus grand auteur de tous les temps? Bien sûr, c'est une question à laquelle on ne peut pas répondre. Si moi j'affirme que Shakespeare est le plus grand auteur et vous répliquez que non, c'est Dante, comment faisons-nous pour nous mettre d'accord? La vraie question donc, c'est plutôt de savoir ce qui fait la grandeur de Shakespeare, 400 ans après sa mort. Pourquoi, en d'autres termes, pendant les 4 siècles depuis sa mort, Shakespeare est-il devenu un des auteurs les mieux aimés, les plus représentés, les plus célèbres, étudiés et mis en scène du monde. Dans cette première partie de notre conférence, je vais vous donner 4 réponses à cette question. Et à la fin, si vous voulez, vous pouvez me dire laquelle des 4 vous préférez. Voici la première. Shakespeare nous a inventés. C'est la réponse que donne Harold Bloom, fameux critique de l'université de Yale, dans un fameux livre qui s'appelle Shakespeare, The Invention of the Human. Notre manière de nous voir, de vivre notre subjectivité et notre intériorité n'est pas immuable et transhistorique, mais elle est construite par des textes, que ce soit des textes écrits ou oraux, et selon Bloom, elle a été construite de manière importante par des textes de Shakespeare. Our ideas as to what makes the self authentically human owe more to Shakespeare than ought to be possible. Les personnages de Shakespeare, ce ne sont pas des êtres humains en chair et en os, mais bien des créations linguistiques constituées par des mots écrits par Shakespeare. Mais aucun auteur littéraire, selon Bloom, n'a créé des personnages qui nous apprennent autant sur les êtres humains, autant sur nous-mêmes, au point où il aurait substantiellement contribué à notre compréhension de nous-mêmes. La deuxième réponse, c'est que ce qui fait la grandeur de Shakespeare, c'est son langage, la beauté et la densité de sa poésie, la richesse et la profondeur de ses images. Je vais vous lire un passage de Macbeth. Le protagoniste, un général de l'armée du roi, à qui des sorcières ont annoncé qu'il sera lui-même roi un jour, accueille dans son château le roi Duncan, un monarque sage et vertueux. Tenté par la prédiction des sorcières, Macbeth, dont le monologue dont je vais vous lire un passage, songe à assassiner le roi dans son sommeil, mais affirme en même temps qu'il n'a aucune excuse pour cet acte et que la conséquence en sera sa damnation éternelle. Voici le passage. Besides, this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off. And pity, like a naked newborn babe striding the blast, or heaven's cherubim horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, that tears shall drown the wind. Notez la sonorité extraordinaire créée, la musique créée par la succession de voyelles et diphtongues longues. Blast, host, air, blow, eye, tears, drown. Notez les multiples allitérations qui contribuent à la sonorité du passage. Duncan, deep, damnation, trumpet, tongued, taking off, naked, newborn, born, babe, blast, blow. Notez aussi les métaphores remarquables. Tears shall drown the wind. Pity shall blow the horrid deed in every eye. La pitié frappera l'horreur de cette action dans tous les yeux. Encore plus remarquable est la comparaison vers la fin du passage. Pity, like a naked newborn babe striding the blast, or heaven's cherubim horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air. Dans cette image extrêmement condensée, la pitié est à la fois semblable à un enfant nouveau-né, tout nu, et à un chérubin sur les invisibles courriers de l'air. À la fois impuissant et extrêmement puissant, immobile et véloce, humain et angélique. En fait, la richesse et la densité de la poésie shakespearienne est telle qu'elle résiste à la compréhension, ou au moins à une compréhension qui maîtriserait le texte une fois pour toutes, raison pour laquelle il nous donne toujours et encore envie d'y retourner. Je passe à ma troisième réponse, à la question de savoir pourquoi Shakespeare est devenu un des auteurs les plus célèbres du monde. Une réponse qui va peut-être vous paraître paradoxale. Shakespeare est lui-même absent de ses pièces de théâtre. Que ce soit Hamlet, Henri V, Othello, La Tempête ou Le Songe d'une nuit d'été, au centre de ces pièces se trouve un vide idéologique. Shakespeare met en scène des personnages en conflit les uns avec les autres et il ne s'infuse dans aucun de ces personnages ou alors dans chacun. Il ne prend pas position. Est-ce que, selon Shakespeare, Hamlet est-il avant tout une âme sensible ou bien un tueur à répétition? Les deux manières de voir Hamlet me semblent tout à fait légitimes. Mais alors, quelle est la vision de Shakespeare sur Hamlet? Comment Shakespeare a-t-il vu le personnage? Nous n'avons aucun moyen de le savoir. De même pour d'autres personnages. Prospero, le protagoniste de La Tempête, est-il magnanime ou tyrannique? Henri V, est-ce un héros désintéressé qui représente le monarque idéal ou est-ce un conquéreur impitoyable et impérialiste? Nous ne le savons pas et Shakespeare ne nous donne pas les moyens de le savoir. Le vide idéologique au centre des pièces de Shakespeare fait qu'elles se prêtent parfaitement à l'appropriation. Durant des siècles, des lecteurs, acteurs, directeurs et artistes des pièces de Shakespeare se sont appropriés les pièces de Shakespeare pour les faire dire ce que eux, ils y trouvent. Les pièces de Shakespeare nous montrent un miroir magique dans lequel nous voyons ce que nous cherchons. Et leur succès mondial et transhistorique s'explique par leur immense adaptabilité idéologique. Je passe à ma dernière réponse. C'est la réponse, pour ainsi dire, la plus académique. Lorsque j'en parle à mes étudiants, je mets 45 minutes pour la développer. Ici, je vais le faire en 3 minutes. Pour comprendre pourquoi Shakespeare parle encore à nous 400 ans après sa mort, comme il le fait, il faut d'abord le placer dans son temps, son entourage, ses institutions. Du vivant de Shakespeare, le théâtre à Londres était devenu une immense industrie de l'entertainment. Pour la première fois depuis l'âge romain, des bâtiments furent construits dont le seul but était la représentation de pièces de théâtre devant un public payant. Ces théâtres accueillaient jusqu'à 3000 spectateurs et il y en avait plusieurs. Londres avait quelques 200 000 habitants à l'époque et on estime que chaque semaine, environ 20 000 personnes allaient voir une pièce. Autant dire que le théâtre, c'était un médium de masse. Dans cette industrie de l'entertainment, des gens gagnaient beaucoup d'argent, un peu comme à Hollywood de notre époque. Et comme Hollywood, le monde du théâtre attirait des gens extrêmement doués. Et Shakespeare en faisait partie. Plus que ça, sa position était en fait absolument unique. Non seulement dramaturge, il était en même temps un des acteurs et un des copropriétaires de la meilleure troupe de l'époque, qui est devenue la troupe du roi, The King's Men, à l'accession de Jacques Ier en 1603. En tant qu'acteur, Shakespeare connaissait parfaitement sa troupe, les talents des différents acteurs, les possibilités de l'espace dans lequel il jouait. En tant que copropriétaire, Shakespeare profitait du succès de sa troupe et devenait riche. Beaucoup de ses contemporains écrivaient également pour la scène. Les troupes maintenaient un large répertoire et avaient constamment besoin de nouvelles pièces. Ces contemporains de Shakespeare étaient payés un prix forfaitaire, une somme assez modique, pour leurs pièces, mais ils ne profitaient pas des recettes. Ils étaient souvent à court d'argent et travaillaient sur leurs pièces à 2, voire 3, voire 4 pour avancer plus vite. Le résultat était ce que j'appelle du fast-food théâtral, des pièces vite produites, vite montées et vite oubliées. Contrairement à la presque totalité de ses dramaturges contemporains, Shakespeare se trouvait dans une situation extrêmement privilégiée. Grâce à la sécurité économique qui venait de sa position de copropriétaire de sa troupe, il pouvait se permettre d'écrire ses pièces seul et de les laisser mûrir lentement, au rythme d'environ 2 par année, des pièces qu'il écrivait et qu'il révisait, et dont il écrivait non seulement des versions courtes pour la scène, mais aussi des versions longues destinées à la lecture. Grâce aux imprimeurs qui commençaient tôt à s'intéresser à lui, Shakespeare était conscient du fait qu'il était en train de devenir un auteur, et ses pièces de théâtre de la littérature. Étant dans une position unique, économiquement et institutionnellement privilégiée, pendant l'âge d'or du théâtre anglais, Shakespeare était certes un dramaturge extrêmement doué, mais il a aussi su profiter de la situation dans laquelle il se trouvait. En résumé, qu'est-ce qui explique donc le mieux le fait que Shakespeare, 400 ans après sa mort, se porte en fait extrêmement bien? Ces personnages, dont le fonctionnement et la psychologie semblent d'une telle subtilité et vraisemblance qu'ils sont capables de nous expliquer à nous-mêmes, voire de nous inventer, ou son langage, qui est d'une telle beauté et densité que nous ne nous en lassons jamais, ou son refus de prise de position idéologique qui nous permet de trouver dans ces pièces ce que nous y cherchons, ou sa position privilégiée au sein du monde du théâtre de son époque, qui lui donnait accès à un maximum de savoir-faire et lui offrait la sécurité économique pour écrire et réécrire ses pièces à son rythme. Le phénomène Shakespeare ne s'explique certes pas une fois pour toutes, mais les 4 réponses peuvent peut-être nous aider à nous en approcher un petit peu. Et avec ça, nous passons à la deuxième partie de cette conférence in English devoted to our research. So we're going to swap languages, we're going to swap seats, and I'm handing over to Devani for the first half of the second part.
Thanks very much. So you'll be hearing a bit more about Martin Bodmer's Shakespeare in the second part of this second part, but I want to talk to you now about some of the recent work that we've been doing here with the Bodmer Lab. For those who don't know, the Bodmer Lab is a University of Geneva digital humanities initiative founded by Jérôme David, Michel Jeanneret, who is with us here tonight, and Radu Sichu. Its principal aim is to digitize and to promote and encourage research on some of the key parts of the collections of the Fondation Bodmer. And that's what we've been doing for the last year with the early English printed books. I want to tell you a bit about some of our aims that we've been working on. Why did we want to come and study this collection? Why is it important? I'll also tell you a bit about our findings. What did we learn? How many early English printed books are there in the collection, and how rare are they? And finally, I'll touch on digitization. Why is it important that all of these books be put online, as is indeed one of the hallmarks of the work that the Bodmer Lab is doing? When we started this project, we had 2 aims. The first was to verify and update Bodmer's catalogue of early English printed books. This is really a question of size. We wanted to find out simply how many such books are there in the collection. This was our starting point. This is the so-called Catalogue des Fiches. It's a collection of drawers that some of you probably know very well. It contains thousands of cards, each of them related to a single book. Our job was to go through these drawers to find books that were relevant to our parameters, early English printed books published between 1475 and 1700, and to examine them. This brings me to our second aim, to create a new catalogue based on these books that we've identified from the Catalogue des Fiches. To do this, we had to examine every book page by page. We were looking for all of the unique particularities that make every book interesting to bibliographers, and we recorded all these notable features. Our goal was that, just as in the Catalogue des Fiches, there is a card for every book, in our catalog, there would be a digital complete bibliographic entry for every copy. So what does this look like? As an example, this is a card from the Catalogue des Fiches of John Donne's poems, the first edition published in 1633. You can see that it has the name of the author, the title, the date of publication, and some miscellaneous bibliographic information. We use these as a starting point, but we really wanted to create something that was a bit simpler, easier to use without specialized knowledge of the collections here at the Bodmer, and publicly understandable. This is what we came up with. This is a full record of the book, such as that appears in our catalog. We now include things like a physical description, enabling bibliographers to see what every page looks like and how many pages there are. We also include features like the measurement of the book, how large is it, as well as other bibliographic particularities you can see here, and I won't read the whole slide. At the bottom, you'll notice other copies, which is something that was extremely important to us. We wanted to both get a sense and to give readers of our catalog a sense of how rare these books really are. And we did this for every book that was relevant to our chronological interest. And so, having done that, what did we find? Well, we found that there were 174 early English printed books published between 1475 and 1700 at the Fondation Bodmer. And we already knew that Shakespeare was a large part of this. Now we can tell you that there are 38 books of Shakespeare's drama and poetry, that is, works written by the man himself, as well as another 22 Shakespeare's sources, adaptations, and responses, works that inspired Shakespeare or grew out of his writings. So, in addition to these large holdings, however, we also noted that there was a whole lot more beyond and besides Shakespeare here. Not only Shakespeare, in fact, but also the literature of his time by contemporary authors, Ben Jonson, his great rival amongst them. And apart from his contemporaries, we noticed that there were books, editions of books that predated Shakespeare's time, that is, medieval and classical texts that were printed during the period of our interest. There are Bibles and theological books, and we know that the Bible was indeed one of Bodmer's pillars of world literature. And beyond these, we found books of natural history, mathematics, philosophy, and so on. The great takeaway from all of this, we think, was that Martin Bodmer, beyond being only interested in Shakespeare and even beyond being interested in the literature of the Renaissance, was also interested in books that had a cultural and historical significance and sought to collect them, as the collection attests. So this analysis that we've undertaken for the past year of this collection and the catalogue, of which I've shown you one entry, is really one half of the work that we're doing with the Bodmer Lab. The second part, which is being undertaken by the Bodmer Lab and its collaborators itself, is digitization. By this I mean that all of these 174 books are being scanned and will be made freely available online in the coming years. You might wonder, why is this the case? Why do we need all 174 of these books made available online? And I'll spend the rest of this presentation telling you a bit about that. The first answer is fairly easy to guess. It's because some of these books might be extremely rare. And this raises another obvious question. How rare are they? It's a good question, and happily now we have the answer. We can tell you that of those 174 books, there are 24 that survive in fewer than 10 copies, 10 or fewer copies in fact, anywhere in the world. So this is an extreme rarity. Perhaps more interestingly, and certainly more rare, are 3 books which survive here at the Bodmer in bibliographically unique variants. That is to say, they're not just rare, but they are one of a kind. I'll give you an example of this rarity with this book, The Moral Philosophy of Donnée. It was translated by Thomas North in 1601 from the Italian, and the copy that you see here in the title page is not a Bodmer copy. It's from the Huntington Library in San Marino, California. When we look up this book in the standard reference work for bibliographers, the short title catalog, we see that this edition, the 1601 edition, has 2 issues. What does that mean? Well, here in the Huntington copy, we see that this book was printed by Simon Stafford in the bottom, imprinted at London by Simon Stafford, 1601. But the short title catalog, next to number 3054.5, tells us of another issue with imprint. The imprint means that we get more information about where this book was actually published. Simon Stafford, dwelling on Adeling Hill near Carter Lane. So the Huntington copy that you see here doesn't tell us anything about Simon Stafford's shop, but there seems that there is another issue that does. The Cunliffe copy, untraced. So at the time of the publication of the short title catalog then, the whereabouts of this copy was not recorded. You won't be surprised to learn, perhaps, that I tell you it's here in the Bodmer. And there you can compare the 2 imprints at the very foot of the page, imprinted at London by Simon Stafford on the one hand, and on the right-hand side, imprinted at London by Simon Stafford, dwelling in Adeling Hill near Carter's Lane on the other hand. So this is the Cunliffe copy. It seems, and indeed is confirmed by the fact that when we open the book, we see that the bookplate of Henry Cunliffe appears there. So this is what I mean when I say that this is a one-of-a-kind, bibliographically rare book. It's extremely important because it's the only example that survives with this imprint. So we have, on the one hand, rare books that have these bibliographically unique features. And on the other hand, we have what I will call rare copies, books that are unique, special, valuable, or otherwise interesting for different reasons to do with their provenance. What might such reasons be? They might be things like information about former owners, readers and collectors who used these books in the time since their printing. And in the Bodmer copies, we've noted about 120 names of librarians, book owners, people who interacted with these books in the hundreds of years since their publication. Secondly, these books might contain marginal annotations that make them interesting to scholars of these texts, people who respond to the text by writing notes in the margins or engaging with the world outside the book. And finally, many of the Bodmer copies are in historic bindings, which themselves tell us about the reception that these books received. Some of them, for instance, have luxury bindings that indicate these were prized volumes that had a special place in the library. Some of them have bindings from their own time, which are worth research and serious scholarship in themselves. And one book that combines all of these 3 features and makes up a rare copy, as I'm defining it, is the Great Bible, 1539, also at the Bodmer. And I want to tell you a bit about. In particular, I want to look at the last leaf. There's an inscription on the last leaf. It dates from the 16th century, and I'll zoom in on it so you can see it a bit more clearly. It says, "This Bible belongeth to Halliworth Church, bought by me, Robert Norton." So this Bible was published in the 16th century, and here's an inscription in a 16th century hand telling us, I bought this Bible for this church. I'm Robert Norton. This church he's talking about is probably Halesworth Church in Suffolk in England. And this inscription really gives us a good sense of the story of this book's acquisition and use in its own time. It tells us a story about someone who has undertaken to present a donation to this church and insists on inscribing himself into this copy so that his legacy won't be forgotten. It's a good example of the social life that books could take on. There's also an additional annotation in this copy, though, that thickens the plot. It's a 20th century annotation, and I'm interested in this part outlined in red. It says, it's by George Goyder, a 20th century librarian. It says, "I have completed this copy by adding the last leaf from an imperfect copy of the same edition, also from Lord Amherst of Hackney's library, which was sold at Sotheby's in 1908. So there it is on the backboard. Goyder is telling us that he took the leaf from another copy, and that this inscription that we've just been marveling at, in fact, does not refer to this Bible. It refers to another imperfect Bible elsewhere, which has now been stripped of this last leaf. My point is that this great Bible is not a particularly rare book, bibliographically speaking, in the sense I've just been describing for the previous example, but it has its own history. It has these layers of information and detail to uncover, and our goal has really been to put all of these together so that future researchers will be able to use the digitized copies to make these connections, as we've been able to do here. So we can see you might have a bibliographically rare book like The Moral Philosophy of Donnée, or you might have a rare and interesting copy like the Great Bible. The third reason for digitization concerns books that are not particularly bibliographically rare, nor are they necessarily marked by any other distinguishing features of provenance. And I call this simply the nature of early printed books, because many of the books that were printed in the early modern period experience or exhibit some of these characteristics. In the early modern period, books were printed by hand, and I think this engraving nicely demonstrates the processes at work. On the left-hand side, you have the compositors, the people who would set the metal type and compose the text, and in this engraving you can see that they're working from a text that has been stuck onto the walls behind them, to use as an example. You can see someone holding a leaf up to his face. That's the proofreader. The text, having been printed, needs to be proofread and checked for errors. Moving across the image, you see someone actually operating the pressman, and you can see some recently printed pages drying in the background. The man in the foreground is putting the texts into order, and I think the man on the right-hand side is meant to be a scholar pontificating as they do. The point of this engraving is that many people and many processes are involved in early modern printing. As a result, errors get introduced, and they get corrected during printing, as our proofreader, who's wearing eyeglasses here, demonstrates. His job is to find the errors in the text, to alert the compositors so that they can go back and make correction as needed. As a result, this means that not every copy that rolls off the press will be identical. They might have what are called stop press corrections, points where the press is literally stopped so that errors can be corrected. What do some of these errors look like, you may wonder? This is the Bodmer copy of the medieval dream poem Piers Plowman by William Langland. It was published in 1550, but as you can see from this image, which I've blown up from the title page, 1505 has been printed. The numbers have been set in the wrong order. Consequently, the date has been stamped out with an ornament, but you can see the numbers appearing underneath. When you encounter something like this, the first thing you do is you go and you check it against other copies. Does this happen in other copies, we wonder? There's the stamped out date in the Bodmer copy. And I went looking at the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C., which has digitized many of its collections as well. This is their copy of the same book. And I'll just zoom in again, put them side by side, and that's the zoomed in version. You can see from this blow-up that the Folger copy does not have the date stamped out. What happens if we look at another copy? This is from the Huntington Library in California again. And we see that not only is the incorrect date stamped out here, but it is in fact corrected. Now, all three of these books are considered the same edition. But you can see they're not the same. At least they're not identical. They're all different in this very small way. And what I want to show you is that this type of close comparison is not easily possible without digitization. Digitizing the Bodmer books means that people can freely consult the copies easily to make these types of discoveries, to ask these types of questions, and to uncover some of the processes that went on inside the chaotic print shop. I think I'll probably stop there and turn you back over to Shakespeare.
Thank you, Devani. So Devani has been focusing on the early modern collection as a whole. I'm going to focus on Shakespeare. I want to say a few words about the history of the Shakespeare collection at the Bodmer. I want to give you a sense of the shape of the Shakespeare collection. I want to highlight just a few Shakespeare books here at the Fondation Martin Bodmer. So Shakespeare is clearly at the heart of the early modern English books at the Bodmer. Martin Bodmer was interested in Shakespeare from very early on, as I'm sure you know. In fact, the very first book he tells us he purchased at the age of 15 was a German translation of The Tempest as illustrated by Edmond Dulac. Shakespeare, of course, is also one of the 5 pillars, according to Bodmer's shape of his collection, at least early on in his career as a collector. Now, what really transformed his collection of Shakespeare was a single purchase he made in 1951, at the very end, beginning of 1952, the purchase of the Rosenbach collection. Now, A.S.W. Rosenbach was a great collector and bibliophile from Philadelphia who had assembled the greatest collection of early Shakespeare editions in private hands. Now, the Shakespeare collection at the Martin Bodmer Foundation today largely corresponds to what Bodmer purchased from Rosenbach in 1951-52. So what is this? Well, it's a 4 folios, meaning the 4 editions of Shakespeare's collected plays published in the course of the 17th century, all 4 in perfect condition. Most noteworthy of the 4, the first folio edition, 1623, I'll say a little more about it in a moment, pristine quality, complete in its original binding, one of the best copies still extant in the world. 55 quartos, which includes adaptations of plays by Shakespeare, 11 so-called supposititious plays, meaning supposed to have been written by or written partly by Shakespeare or attributed by Shakespeare, but in fact now not thought to be by Shakespeare, and 3 source plays. Now, the sale of this collection at the time was a big event. It was such a big event that, amusingly, there was a farewell party for the first folio in particular, as we're told about in a recent publication about the Shakespeare First Folio. The soon-to-be Geneva First Folio was given a glittery, celebrity-studded going-away party, attended by Margaret Truman, President Truman's daughter, among others. The party's central event was the presentation of a cake decorated to resemble a first folio. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find a photo of that cake. I would love to have one. It's an event which also made the front page of the New York Times on the 12th of March, 1952. There was some disagreement about the amount Bodmer paid for the collection. Something over 1 million is what Time magazine wrote in March 1952, which corresponds more or less to what the Times wrote more than 1 million a bit earlier in the same month. But in fact, H.B. Krause, the great bibliophile and book collector, was better informed when he wrote in his autobiography that Martin Bodmer paid $330,000 plus a trade of his very choice duplicates. He had a fine set of the 4 folios plus some quartos. So before 1951, Bodmer had collected some early Shakespeare editions, including a set of folios, not quite as good as the ones he then acquired in 1951, as well as a handful of quartos. He paid $330,000 plus he traded the Shakespeare collection he had acquired up to that point. So a few words about this most important book in Bodmer's Shakespeare collection, the first folio, published in 1623, contains 36 of his plays, almost the totality of his plays, assembled by his friends and fellow actors John Hemming and Henry Condell, also players for The King's Men with Shakespeare, published by Edward Blunt and others, a publishing conglomerate in London, with a famous prefatory poem by Ben Jonson, in which he tells us that Shakespeare is not of an age, but for all time. Here we are, 400 years later. We believe that about 750 copies were printed of the first folio. And actually, today, it's not a particularly rare book, because there are about 233 copies still extant. Few of which, as I've mentioned, are in as good a state as the one here at the Bodmer. Price of a first folio in 1623, 15 shillings, so not quite £1. Price of a first folio in 2001, when auctioned at Christie's in New York, 6.16 million. Its price has gone up. Here's the title page of the Bodmer first folio with the famous engraving by the Dutch engraver Martin Droeshout. The 7 copies extant today in continental Europe, 3 in Germany, 2 in France, 1 in Italy, and 1 in Switzerland, here in Cologny. Apart from the folios, very important publications here at the Bodmer are so-called substantive quarto editions of Shakespeare's plays. Substantive means that these editions are based on Shakespearean manuscripts, meaning they take us as closely as it gets to what Shakespeare actually wrote in the absence of any Shakespearean manuscripts. Of these, the Bodmer houses Love's Labour's Lost, 1598, Romeo and Juliet, the year after, second part of Henry IV and Much Ado About Nothing, 1600, Troilus and Cressida, 1609, Othello, 1622, and The Two Noble Kinsmen, a play Shakespeare wrote in collaboration with John Fletcher, published in 1634. We saw a moment ago that the first folio is not a particularly rare book today. Well, these quartos are, as this list with the number of extant copies shows, of most of these, there are now somewhere between 10 and 20 copies known to survive, slightly more for the Henry IV, and far more for the two noble kinsmen. Of Troilus and Cressida, incidentally, the first edition exists in 2 issues with a different title page, different prefatory material. The copy at the Bodmer belongs to the first issue, of which only 4 copies are known to survive. And that copy I'd like to single out because it's a particularly interesting copy here at the Bodmer because of this. This is what it looks like. It is in fact the only surviving Shakespeare quarto playbook published during Shakespeare's lifetime that survives uncut, with its margins not having been trimmed, giving us a sense of how large the margins originally would have been before they were trimmed, so cut down in the process of having them bound. This is a genuinely unique survival here at the Bodmer. You can get a sense of how large those margins are if you look at it next to another early quarto edition of a Shakespeare play, A Midsummer Night's Dream. Now, apart from what I've called the substantive quarto playbooks, there are the reprint quarto editions, of which I'm giving you the list here with the title, then which quarto edition it is, and then the year in which that edition was published. We should notice that of all the plays that were first published in quarto editions before 1623, there's only one, namely Richard III, of which the Bodmer does not own a copy. I mentioned a moment ago the price of a Shakespeare First Folio today. What about a Shakespeare quarto? Well, they would have cost 6p in Shakespeare's own time, half a shilling, not very much indeed. Well, the most recent Shakespeare quarto to have come on the market, which I'm aware of, is this one here, Merchant of Venice, dated 1600, in fact published in 1619, which fetched $550,000 at Sotheby's. Now, we've tried to understand how the Shakespeare collection of quarto playbooks at the Bodmer compares to that of other libraries. The total number of Shakespeare quarto playbook editions published between 1594 and 1660 is 73. Now, there isn't a single library in the world that houses copies of all of them. Now, obviously, the Bodmer's collection cannot compare to the very best in the world. Those leading research libraries in the US and the UK, the Huntington Library, San Marino, California, outside Los Angeles, British Library, Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C., the Bodleian in Oxford, nor Trinity College Library, Cambridge, nor is it quite up there with the next 5, Harvard, Yale, 2 major libraries in Edinburgh, the National and the University Library, and the New York Public Library. But it does follow right after with 26 Shakespeare quarto playbook editions prior to 1660, and is quite far ahead of number 12 on this list, the University of Texas Library in Austin, Texas. Now, I'd like to move on from the plays just to give you a little sense of the collection more generally, to what else there is. Let's look at the poetry very briefly, and let's start with what Shakespeare poetry there was, published in his own time. The narrative poems, Venus and Adonis and The Rape of Lucrece, then 2 collections of lyric poetry, Passionate Pilgrim and Shakespeare's sonnets, and then the collection of Shakespeare's poems. Now of these, at the Bodmer, there is an edition, fairly late edition, of The Rape of Lucrece, 1655, 9th edition. Then most remarkably, a copy of the first edition of the sonnets, 1609, and a copy of the poems, 1640. Now there's one feature in particular of that copy of Shakespeare's sonnets that is well known to the world of Shakespeare scholarship, and that is this page here, where an early reader has added after the last sonnet, "What a heap of wretched, infidel stuff!" A passage that is often quoted in modern scholarship on Shakespeare's sonnets, though more often than not, the scholars quoting will locate the copy from which they quote at the Rosenbach Library in Philadelphia, rather than the Fondation Martin Bodmer in Geneva, where it has been since about 1952. Over and above the poetry, there are late 17th century editions of Shakespeare's plays, Hamlet, Othello, Macbeth, Julius Caesar, pseudo-Shakespeare, so Locrine, 1595, by W.S., according to the title page. The London Prodigal, 1605, by William Shakespeare, according to the title page. Troublesome Reign of King John, also assigned to Shakespeare on the title page. Here you have an instance, the title page of the Bodmer copy of The London Prodigal, said to be by William Shakespeare. Well, actually not. Restoration adaptations of Shakespeare at the Bodmer, quite a long list, which I'm not going to go through in any detail. And then to give you an even fuller sense of the shape of the Shakespeare collection, in the larger sense of that term, Shakespeare's contemporaries at the Bodmer, Bacon, Beaumont and Fletcher, Burton, Chapman, Donne, Johnson, Lilly, Marlowe, Milton, Sidney, Spenser, and so on. There's one playbook I like to finish with, because I think it's really interesting in the context of where it now is, and that is this quarto playbook. A Midsummer Night's Dream, it's dated 1600, even though it was in fact published in 1619 for reasons which are too complicated to explain here. What I'm interested in, of course, is its printer's device. The Geneva Arms, with the half eagle and key, with the Geneva Reformation motto, Post Tenebras Lux. Why? It was printed in 1619 by William Jaggard, not actually by James Roberts, as the title page had it, but William Jaggard had inherited the material, including this printer's device, from James Roberts in 1606. James Roberts had married the widow of John Charlwood, who had owned this printer device in the 1590s, and John Charlwood had inherited the printer's device from someone called Rowland Hall. Now, Rowland Hall came to Geneva in 1556 as one of the Marian exiles who escaped when the Catholic Queen Mary, also known as Bloody Mary, in case you thought that was a cocktail, ascended the throne, came to Geneva 1556. In 1557 was officially recognized as a Geneva resident, and in 1558 he started printing in Geneva. And what he printed was what is known as the Geneva Bible, published in 1560, year in which Rowland Hall returned to England, where he had made for himself the printer's device with the Geneva arms. And it's with this publication which brings together, I think, London, where this book first came into being, and Geneva, where it is today, which brings together the time 400 years ago when this book came into being, and now when this book is still extant here, and brings together Shakespeare, author of this play, as well as Martin Bodmer, who acquired it, that I want to conclude. Thank you.